Hello and welcome to Agile Shorts. We're here in the middle of the summer, and we're talking about who you are, right? And it's about today's topic. We want to talk about you are what you measure. And it's kind of a little phrase that we have all used around here for a while. Trying to put a little levity and humor into our workday like we always do. But really, coming down and thinking about what is it that we should be measuring? What is it that we measure today? What is it we've been measuring over time? And how have times changed to the point where what we should be measuring? Are we measuring all the right things? Because it's interesting. I'll be interested to find out from you, Kumar, when we start talking about this. We find out a lot about companies when we get an opportunity to go into different locations. In being virtual a lot in this day and age, and start asking them about what they do measure. It tells us a lot about their culture. It tells us a lot about their DNA as an organization, kind of where they're coming from, and are they maybe even some of the challenges that they're having in terms of meeting or driving change, innovation, meeting customer expectations, things like that in their space based on what they measure. It's a little bit similar to you are what you eat in some cases. This is the organizational's health is kind of they are what they measure, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was this topic that kind of stemmed from a conversation that, you and I and Jolly, who's not here today, were having the other day about metrics. And it's for companies that are embarking on their agile journey, it's always a topic of conversation. What is it that we measure? What's velocity? What's our cycle time? Whatever those things are. And people really get hung up on those measures. And so we thought it would be interesting just to talk about this from the context of the outcome versus outputs, which, to what Mike was saying earlier, you can kind of tell where an organization is by the types of metrics that they keep, whether they're agile or not. If companies are more focused on the outputs, the deliverables, the utilization, those types of things, it leads to certain types of behaviors. And for companies that are more focused on the outcome, and it's not like one or the other, black or white. I mean, there's certainly companies sort of lean more heavily towards one than the other, more output focused or more outcome oriented. But for the most part, we have noticed that a lot of the metrics are output focused. And I don't know, Mike, what do you think about that? And what are some examples of output metrics, just so our audience is clear as to what we're talking about?
Yeah, we've seen that a lot in this data analytics driven world. It's so easy to get a lot of kind of internal metrics, right? Metrics that are generated by things that you do inside of your organization. And those tend to be a lot about output, a lot more about output than outcome. They're generated based on flow and how things go and what's being tracked. But you look at things like utilization. You look at in the Agile world and in Scrum, you'll talk about velocity and story points and all these different types of metrics that are very trackable, but can be used for things that they were never really intended to be used for. Which can give you a false sense of success or achievement because you're not using the metric for something it was really, really good at producing for you. It doesn't really tell you what you think you're getting out of the metric. They're valuable. I think a lot like the Agile Manifesto. While both things are valuable, you and I and others that we work with would value outcomes over output. We've seen it happen a lot, and you've heard us say it before. People fail efficiently every day at meeting their goals and objectives and meeting customer expectations. So I think that output metrics exist out there in mass. There's lots of them. And I think that folks have plenty of output, probably even more output metrics than they need. And even some of them that are probably antiquated based on the type of work that's being done today, the thought work that's being done, and the innovative type thinking time and space that we need to come up with the new wow, right? The new thing. That doesn't happen just by being fully utilized and engaged all the time. The human brain doesn't work that way. So how do we move more towards generating, and how do we look at ourselves and say, do I have outcome-based metrics and measures in my system, or am I just kind of seeing that as I'm seeing my output-based metrics and trying to use it for outcome measurements, right? Kumar, have you seen examples of this in your, over the last couple of years? Anything you can kind of talk to the audience about that you've seen specifically?
Yeah, certainly. I think that most organizations are probably more in the output realm, and examples of output-based metrics, as you mentioned, Mike, are things like velocity. And velocity was really created as a mechanism for teams to be able to understand their own capacity to do work, and somehow it got translated into a productivity metric, which leads to some interesting behaviors.
Yes.
You are what you measure. And so if people are starting to use velocity as a measure of, hey, how good is this team and how productive is this team? Guess what? That team is going to find ways to make their velocity go up. And I don't mean that they're going to work harder and actually produce more. They're just going to find ways to inflate the number. There was a study done years ago with dolphins, and I forget where it was, and the dolphins were trained or given a reward for trash that they brought back to the researchers at the end of the day. Trash that was thrown in there by human visitors, right, visiting these dolphins for the dolphin show. So for every piece of trash that the dolphins brought back, they were given a fish. And so the dolphins are pretty smart animals. I mean, a lot of people equate their intelligence to that of the great apes, chimpanzee or something like that. And so you've got these dolphins, really smart, really social animals. And so they figured this out pretty quickly. And they said, all right, let's rip the trash up into smaller pieces. We get more fish as a reward.
Yeah.
And so, that's a great example of an output-based metric. They're like, okay, we'll just give you more pieces of trash. We'll get more fish. Right. And so if management looks for more points, the teams are going to figure out pretty quickly to generate more points. However, it may have no effect on creating additional value for our customers. Right. It's the same amount of value that's being generated ultimately. It's the same outcome that's being generated, and maybe not even the right outcome. Right. So that's one example I can think of is the velocity of teams being used as a proxy for productivity. And I think there are many better ways to do that. And it's not really about the productivity. It's more about, is the team aligned to the desired outcome? And there are ways to measure that and really get the team aligned to that goal, that target, that vision. And then you don't really have to worry about the productivity so much. The team takes care of it. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, it's very true, and I like what you said about the behaviors part of this, right? They play on each other, right? The metrics will help to form an environment where the behaviors that you're looking for actually happen, there's looking at this and saying, well, how do I know where I'm at with this? If I were to say today, if I were to look at my organization, how do I know that I've got where my metrics are and what type of metrics do I have? And you can do simple things like a simple Ben Franklin, where you're putting outcome-based type measures that you do today and output-based measures that you're doing today, and just list them out and be very honest with yourself and critical. The likelihood is you're going to have a whole lot of output-based metrics that you do today that provide value for certain things, but they're not going to be usable really for outcome measures per se. So this idea of thinking about today in today's world, how tightly coupled are you to your market space? How much data do you have coming from there in terms of your performance, your quality, the way people envision and view your organization, the way they view your products and services? How quickly can you gather that information? How good do you think the information is? And how quickly can you take that information and turn it into something that allows you to actually make actionable things that you can do inside your organization? If you're focused on those types of things first, and you're seeing increases in outcomes or the outcomes that you're trying to generate, which in a lot of cases, we were talking about this earlier, Kumar, you're talking about in the world of like stories and initiatives and stuff like that. It's around those features and initiatives and those things that you really want to achieve as a group of people or an organization, both in terms of for your community and your customers and for yourself, your organization, and your people. How many of those things are you measuring? Are your people happier? Are your people are your people feeling more challenged? Do they feel valued? Right? They're harder to capture. You probably don't have all of the ways to capture them. There's lots of information out there on how to capture those types of things. But first and foremost, look and see what you have today and measure that out. And you want at least an even weighted scale to say, I don't have to necessarily get rid of the output stuff, but I need to balance that with some outcome-based focus. And be able to find and test it and see what kind of responses you get back on that. Because you're going to need to get those types of inputs in order to be able to shift your focus and balance your focus towards both output and outcome.
Yeah, it brings to mind several years ago, well, actually more than several years, it was almost a decade ago. I worked for a company.
Goes by fast, right?
It does. It's amazing how time flies. Yeah, more than a decade ago now that I think about it. I worked for a company where their teams were, it was a very a mature organization in terms of their Agile maturation. They were one of the early proponents of XP and Scrum, and so had been doing it since 2002 or so. And so these teams, their product owners were actually the product manager for that product service. And the teams are so attuned to their customers, in terms of the types of goals that the product manager would have for them. The product manager and product owner really didn't write stories as much as they gave them very clear goals. Hey, this quarter we want to improve website visits by X, and we want to improve our customer NPS scores by Y, and we want to, what things like that. It's like really clear targeted goals, with clear targets that they need, that the team was being asked to think about how to achieve. And so the team would actually come up with the scenarios and the experiments to try, and the outcome, of course, was defined by those, increased by whatever percentage, right? And so they built telemetry into their systems to assess how the users were using their systems and what things that they were trying were working to get them to stay on their site longer. Again, this is a web product, web services, things like that. But that's an example of a team very attuned to the outcome. No one was tracking their velocity. No one was tracking their, except for the team. The team was, but no one cared about that. It was more a team metric to help them assess their capacity, which is what it was intended for, rather than a productivity metric. In terms of productivity, the organization was just really looking at what features were being deployed to production that resulted in that change, in that outcome, that desired outcome for that product. And so they are what they measured. They were what they measured. They were able to very nimbly and agilely, if that's a word. Did I just make a word up?
Agilely? I think you did, but we'll run with it. We're live, right?
That's right, we are. Yeah, there's no one watching at the moment, but there was someone on earlier. So we're very nimbly and agilely responding to the market, right? The way the market was reacting to the changes that they made. And actually, this is how a lot of how marketing teams work, right? They conduct short little experiments, and they see how the public responds to an email campaign and so on. Marketing teams have a lot to teach software teams about being agile, and nimble, and really thinking about the outcome that they're trying to achieve.
Leadership teams too. I think you're right. Those industries that are really in tune with the community of people out there are very good at outcome-based measurements, right? They're very attuned. They've been doing it for a long time. It's their business.
That's right.
So I think you're right. I think there's a lot that can be drawn from those industries and the people within your organization that do that today. Talking with those folks and saying, how do you come up with this and how do you come up with that, and really saying, well, how do I take that back to my space and what does that mean to us? What does that mean to our part of the organization? Or in a leadership sense, how do I create an environment where everybody, to your point earlier, Kumar, how do we get everybody pointed in the same direction? How do we get everybody measured on the same types of outcomes so that everybody's output can be what it needs to be to reach those goals without a lot of micromanagement or centralized management? Even you can have this very distributed, and in today's day and age, that's a very big asset, right? To be able to do that.
It sure is. And actually, this is a topic in a meetup that we're co-hosting tomorrow called Tight Loose Tight. That's the name of the meetup. We'll put the link in the YouTube at least, and certainly LinkedIn, wherever we're broadcasting, so you're aware of it. And we talk about tight being, hey, set that clear vision, that mission, the goal. Loose, let the team figure out how to achieve that mission. And tight again in terms of the measures, the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. And this very simple pattern has been proven to work. Our friends over in Netherlands are co-hosting this with us, and it should be a good meetup to talk about. One thing I wanted to also mention that, you are what you measure doesn't just apply to organizations and teams. It applies to individuals as well.
Yes.
Right? Your own personal goals and targets and so on and so forth. A lot of time people don't take the time, myself included, to sort of articulate, hey, where do I want to be in a year, in 6 months, in a quarter, in 5 years, in 10 years, whatever it might be. And how would I know I've gotten there? What are those measures that would help me assess, hey, did I reach my goal?
And what is inspecting? Yes.
Exactly. Definitely. And then sort of inspecting and adapting and sort of adjusting, experimenting, and trying to figure out, okay, what's the magic formula that will help me achieve that goal, right? Whether it's weight loss or a new career or being a better speaker or whatever it might be, right? So it applies to individuals just as much as it does to teams and organizations. Teams at any level, right? Leadership teams, marketing teams, legal teams, software development teams. I think you are what you measure is a truism for no matter where you are.
I have an example for that. Just in a conversation yesterday I happened to have with the CEO of another organization, and he said we got on the topic about a little bit about some balance stuff, right? About how do you balance certain things. And he said, I went through real life, almost like a made for movie story where it was a pretty harrowing event, a very, very close to life ending event. On a business trip with other members of their business team.
Wow.
And he said it was prior to the incident happening, they're all measuring success based on numbers and bottom line and blah, 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 blah. And they get done with this life-changing event. And the next day they're all talking about, what are we doing? Why is this our focus, right? We almost lost our lives yesterday. What should be our focus? How do we balance this a little bit better? Because I look back and I said, that was what I was focused on. That is not the whole story. It's a piece of it, but it's not the whole story. So yeah, I think taking the time to inspect that and to put other things in there other than just the financials, the career success, the advancement, whatever those things are, what are some of those other outcomes you're looking for? And make that a priority, make that a balance within what's going on. People are dealing with that a lot right now with COVID, with working from home.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, and then things are changing, right? It's what's it called? The big resignation. People sort of leaving their jobs because of this fear of going back into the office. Mm-hmm. And that sort of ties in with this TLT movement, especially in Europe, where lots of companies there are embracing this work from anywhere, hybrid work environment in the US too. It's not that it's not here. It's just the way that some of the companies in Europe, especially Telenor and others that have embraced TLT as a way to manage this virtual hybrid workforce, right? Some people in, not all, and they don't really mandate whether people need to come back in the office or not. It's sort of a choice. It's much more flexible, and they're able to do this because throughout COVID, productivity didn't see a hit at all. With a remote workforce, they worked just as delivered just as much value as they were before. In some cases, it did lead to some burnout for people because sitting in front of a computer, a camera all day long, whatever, is I can personally attest it's quite stressful. and personally, I am looking forward to getting back into an office. But again, when you just think about you are what you measure, companies that are taking a more proactive view of what the outcomes are that they're looking to achieve, and allowing flexibility and freedom in how to achieve those outcomes are probably going to be well positioned to have survived COVID, and certainly well positioned to survive this, the sort of the push back into the workplace, in the offices and stuff like that.
Yeah, I agree. It's the landscape is forever changed. The new norm is going to continue to normalize over in the next couple of years, even. And we've seen a decade's worth of change get compacted into 8.5 months.
Right.
So yeah, it's time to start looking at these things that you need to add to your toolkit and to balance things out, because they're going to become very important, and they're going to allow you to operate in this world that has pivoted on us. So I recommend, tomorrow's meetup is going to be really, really interesting, especially for a lot of leaders and a lot of informal leaders within organizations that have teams and other things that they're doing. But I thank you for your time today, Kumar. This was a great conversation.
Yeah, it was.
And I hope everybody else got a lot out of it as well. It's a really important topic, and spend some time on looking at your outcomes and the measures that you use, and it'll take you a long way.
Yep. Thanks, Mike. See y'all later.
Bye-bye.
Bye.